To today's session on resources and spaces. My name is Jillian Robbins. I'm going to be your MC today from the Free Library of Philadelphia. We're going to have two presentations today talking about government resources and crowdfunding. Everyone loves free resources in the library world. Each presenter is going to have 25 minutes to present, and I'll let the presenter know when they have 1 minute left. We ask that any questions you have for the presenter to put in the chat. Ash is here monitoring the chat. We have approximately 5 minutes for questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. Any questions left unanswered, we invite you to bring them to our networking session this evening directly following the session at 5 p.m. Please remember to keep your mics muted and your cameras off when our speakers are doing their presentations. Our first speakers are Zoe Mayhook, she, her, hers, and Annette Bochenek, I'm sorry if I messed up your name already, Ph.D. She's also she, hers, hers, and they're both joining us from Purdue University, presenting on government information for entrepreneurs, valuable resources for starting and managing small businesses. Zoe Mayhook is an assistant professor in the Purdue Libraries and School of Information Studies and a business information specialist in the Parrish Library of Management and Economics, where she serves as the subject liaison for business law, economics, marketing, and finance. Additionally, she works as a legal researcher for Friedman Rubin Law Firm, a civil litigation firm based in Washington State. Mrs. Mayhook received her MLIS through the University of Washington and an MBA from Gonzaga University. Her research interests include demystifying government resources for students, entrepreneurs, and librarians alike. Her recent article titled Privately Held Companies, Legislation, Regulation, and Limited Dissemination of Financial Information tackles locating the often elusive financial information of private companies using government sources. And Annette Bochenek, Ph.D., is an assistant professor and business information specialist at Purdue University and digital services advisor at Arlington Heights Memorial Library. She received her MLS from the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, and her Ph.D. from Dominican University. Take it away.
All right, well, thank you for that introduction. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So we are thrilled to be here. Again, my name is Zoe Mayhook, and I am also pleased to introduce my colleague, Dr. Annette Bochenek. And as mentioned, we are both assistant professors and business information specialists at Purdue University. And our presentation today is on government information for entrepreneurs, which will include valuable resources for starting and managing small businesses. Next slide.
Yeah. There we go.
So the United States is a mixed market economy, and that includes both capitalistic and socialistic characteristics. And as a result, private companies have quite a bit of economic freedom. They're also limited by laws and regulations, and can be both limited and supported by economic interventions by the US government, which aim to serve a public good. Our mix of capitalism and socialism makes the United States government very motivated to promote and support economic growth and prosperity. And as a result, there are many resources available that can help entrepreneurs start, manage, and grow their businesses. And this is beneficial to entrepreneurs for a lot of reasons. As I'm sure many of you are aware, business databases can be really expensive. And as an alternative, government resources are either free or offered at a very low cost. Government publications are also publicly available as opposed to proprietary, so you don't need special memberships or subscriptions to access this information. And additionally, all of the resources that we'll mention today are disseminated electronically, though physical government publications have been made available through the Federal Depository Library Program. Government information is also authoritative. Some of these documents are even verified as official documents. And government information can also be data rich with an extensive reach in regards to the population sample size and using trustworthy methodologies and data collection practices. Because of this reach, there are often data available at the federal, state, and local levels, which can be very helpful for entrepreneurs interested in seeing local consumer, industry, market, and economic information. So our presentation today is divided into 4 sections: education and training, funding and loans, industry and market data, and economic indicators. The selected resources are not exhaustive due to the obvious time constraints today, but represent a sample of frequently used sources that may be helpful to your patrons. As we'll be alternating sections to keep this, fun and interesting, and give us both opportunities to take sips of water. And we will start off with Dr. Bochenek, who will talk about education and training.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, of course, beginning with education and training, we know that there are a lot of different steps one needs to take when it comes to actually setting up a new business. And so when it comes to creating that new business, everyone needs to start somewhere. And the process of establishing a new business can easily seem overwhelming as there are many different factors to consider. And similarly, training can also be a concern among entrepreneurs, whether wishing to learn more about the basics of starting and maintaining a business, or just training employees. There are many helpful government resources available to access. And here we have some different sources available to you in this category. There is USA.gov, which is an excellent resource to use as a starting point. Here you can learn about writing a business plan, determining the legal structure of business, and much more. The website also does an excellent job of demystifying the different processes of starting a business, and also offers clear, concise language on the subject. It also functions as an ideal sort of gateway resource to learning about starting a business and opening the door to many helpful sources and training tools. We also have the SBA, or Small Business Administration, and they have several different resources exhibited in their website. But the first one I wanted to mention is the Learning Center. The SBA is a treasure trove of educational resources, and they offer a variety of courses to help you research, plan, and turn your ideas into new businesses. In addition, they also help individuals launch businesses, help find funding, and also help out with seeking customers and considering different locations. There's also a local assistance component through SBA, and they have a variety of locations that may be geographically convenient to an entrepreneur. By connecting with local SBA branches, you can avoid common business mistakes and receive advice from experienced small business owners. At the same time, you can also explore the advantageous option of working with local SBA partner organizations and receiving free access to mentors and trainings. Finally, there's also the SBDC, or Small Business Development Center, which is also a noteworthy resource for education and training. Here, there are current resources in relation to COVID-19 training and education, so it's particularly timely. And there are also a multitude of regional workshops on a variety of subjects and skill sets to explore. I also wanted to depict a couple screenshots from the different websites mentioned. We do have USA.gov, and you can see there are many different avenues to explore within this one website. But as far as those early stages of educating oneself and exploring training opportunities in relation to starting a business, there are some tools available right there from their homepage, as well as some of the different options that you see pictured here. We also mentioned SBA. This is not the entire website for the Learning Center, but just a sampling of some of the courses that they offer. So you can see that there are a wide variety of different courses represented in terms of different stages of actually starting a business. So lots to explore here as well. I also mentioned the local assistance feature. So depending upon where you're located, you can also key in your city, your zip code, and access locations that could be convenient to you. So if you're able to work with them, if that's more advantageous to you, it's definitely another opportunity to consider. And in addition, the SBDC also has a local option. So being located in West Lafayette, Indiana, here at Purdue, I did a search for our area specifically, and this tied me over to the Indiana Small Business Development Center and the different resources therein. So again, something that can be advantageous to you in your particular geographic area. And with that, we'll move on back to Zoe Mayhook for funding and loans.
There we go. Sorry, I was muted. So whether you work in a public or academic library, you might find that your patrons are particularly interested in how to find capital for their businesses to serve a lot of different purposes. They might want to start a business and need funding to get their ideas off the ground, or they may need funding to grow their businesses, perhaps to get new equipment, hire new employees, remodel their building, or open up new locations. And of course, given our current public health environment, many businesses are looking for funding to ride out the pandemic and avoid closing their doors for good. So the first resource here is the SBA Lender Match, which connects small businesses with SBA-approved community development financial institutions or small lenders. Small business owners fill out a brief survey and then are connected with potential lenders within a few days. SBA-associated award programs also provide grant opportunities for qualifying individuals. Many of the individual grants relate to providing entrepreneurship training programs, such as the Boots to Business Funding Opportunity, the Service Disabled Veteran Entrepreneurship Training Program, and the Women Veteran Entrepreneurship Training Program. And a full list of these are available, as well as others, through grants.gov. What may be more appropriate currently, though, are the SBA's coronavirus relief options. This includes the Paycheck Protection Program, which is aimed at helping businesses keep their workforce employed. It mostly works as a loan forgiveness program that can be applied to an existing SBA lender. There's also the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program that can be requested by small business owners, agricultural businesses, and nonprofits, and then can be applied to working capital or normal operating expenses. The SBA Express Bridge Loan Program gives businesses that already have an SBA Express lender access to up to $25,000 in loan funding to help with temporary loss of revenue. And then finally, the SBA debt relief option involves the SBA paying 6 months of principal, interest, and associated fees with SBA 504 commercial real estate loans, 7A small business loans, and microloans dispersed prior to September 27th of this year. However, this does not apply to other coronavirus relief options. A lot of the funding that might be most appropriate for small businesses, though, will be available at the state and local level. Thus, you can also use the local assistance search to connect and locate local funding opportunities in your area. And then finally, the govloans.gov website is an aggregator of different types of government loan opportunities and captures many of the loans that have already been mentioned, with some additional opportunities such as loans through the U.S. Department of the Interior, Indian Affairs, and the USDA. For the Lender Match service, I'll describe a little bit more about what this process, how this process works and what it looks like. So a small business owner would just click on that Find Lenders button. Next slide. And then they just fill out a form. It tends to take less than 5 minutes to complete, and it asks them questions about what their company does, how much experience they have, how much funding they need, what the funding will be used for, and then a few other easy questions about whether they have collateral or are currently generating revenue. And then within 2 days, the requester should receive an email with contact information of the lender that expressed interest in providing a loan. And requesters could then talk to that lender, compare rates and fees, and submit a loan application. And the next slide. So the SBA grants page looks pretty similar. You just click on that red Find Grants button. And then that leads you to the SBA Associated Awards programs, and then you can read a little bit on the programs, and then that can lead you to more detailed information on the different grant opportunities. And that also goes for the coronavirus relief page, which displays links to the different funding options where you can learn more. And for example, the Economic Injury Disaster loan page provides information on the purpose and terms, and then as before, you can just follow that red button to begin the application process. And the SBA's local assistance tool can also be used to find local funding. I did a search for resources around Indiana as well, and one of those options was the Central Indiana Small Business Development Center. And this page from there had a funding section that included the Indiana Small Business Restart Grants, which is funded by the Federal CARES Act. And then we have our final website, the govloans.gov, which, as mentioned, just lists the business loans, and you can, it's sort of like a one-stop shop for locating federal government-backed business loans. And next, Dr. Bochenek will talk about industry and market research.
Great. So once an entrepreneur has a solid idea for a business product or a service, another important step to consider, of course, is the market for that good or service. By targeting a certain consumer group and conducting industry and market research, the entrepreneur will be better equipped and prepared for how to best service and connect with this audience. And of course, there are several resources available on this subject as well. We do also tap into the SBA once again here for market research information. And among its many resources, the SBA also offers tools in relation to market research. Here, entrepreneurs can gather demographic information to explore the different opportunities for gaining customers, as well as learning about any limitations to growing an audience of consumers. We also have Commerce.gov, run by the US Department of Commerce, which also offers industry and market research information. Entrepreneurs can access a wide variety of different reports in addition to articles, data, and population statistics. All of these tools can be helpful to consider when trying to learn more about a particular audience and to attract customers. And finally, one of the more robust sources of information to consider is Census.gov. As technology continues to improve and the census's broad reach is more apparent, census data plans are an increasingly important role in US commerce and the economy, and are especially pivotal as a research tool. Census.gov provides a great deal of information regarding the population as well as the demographics of our country. The Census Bureau's population and income data can be used as excellent tools for evidence-based decision-making, leading entrepreneurs to be better informed when selecting business locations or investing in real estate. And among the many different tools available, entrepreneurs can explore data, access survey and program information, and explore a variety of different business resources. So as mentioned, SBA.gov does hold several tools in relation to market research. You can see they do have their initial startup options here, but also specifically in their site, they have options to use market research to find customers. You can also look into competitive analyses to find a market advantage and explore different small business data and trends. This also stems from the SBA.gov website. Depending on the type of market research you're doing and what types of business data and trends you're interested in, they have a really helpful chart here that depicts different focuses on different types of small business data and trends that you could be potentially interested in looking into, and they have linked different references into those focus areas as well. Commerce.gov, as mentioned too, is a great resource to explore. Here you can see they have listed different economic indicators, but also population statistics, environmental data, performance data, and a wide variety of reports to look into as well. And finally, as mentioned, Census.gov. Again, there's a lot of information here to unpack, but as far as helpful items to entrepreneurs, there is a great deal of information here as well that can be readily accessed and explored, definitely concerning population projections and estimates, and information again about demographics in certain areas when you are researching that target group. And we'll move on to economic indicators and data.
All right, so our last section is on economic indicators and data, and this is important because entrepreneurs and small business owners use this information a lot to make business and financial decisions that can help them prepare or respond to changing economic conditions. And there are quite a few sources for this information. So the first one that I'll mention is the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and their mission is to promote better understanding of the US economy by providing timely and relevant and accurate economic counts data. People often consult the BEA for gross domestic product numbers at the federal, state, and local level, but also they provide data on personal income by states, industry facts, and foreign trade and investments. And one notable source from the BEA is the Survey of Current Business, which provides articles and data releases, as well as additional analysis and commentary from economists. Next is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which also provides a lot of fruitful economic data and indicators on employment, labor, inflation, prices, productivity, and many others. And a lot of this information is available at the national, regional, state, and local level. Some indicators that you can access here are the Consumer Price Index, which shows the change in prices for consumer goods and services. Additionally, you can find the Producer Price Index, which shows the change in selling prices for domestic production. So these are the costs from the viewpoint of industries as opposed to costs to the consumers. And this is helpful because the PPI can also be a leading indicator of consumer inflation. Finally, the unemployment rates are another primary indicator, which of course is the percentage of people who are jobless but actively seeking work. The economic census is another great resource for all sorts of data, including total number of establishments, value of shipments or revenue, total number of employees, payroll, and other industry-specific data. And then there are also a lot of notable collections through the census here, including the County Business Pattern Series, which include, according to the census, can be useful for researching economic activity in small areas and can be used for analyzing the markets and setting up sales quotas and developing budgets for within small businesses. The annual survey of entrepreneurs shows the economic and demographic characteristics of businesses and business owners, and this can be used by business owners for comparison purposes, and they can also get an idea of the R&D opportunities conducted by other entrepreneurs. And then the business formation statistics are said to help businesses and researchers assess the current state of early entrepreneurship at the national level, by providing data on business applications as well as actual and projected business formations. And then my final recommendation is the Federal Reserve of Economic Data, also known as FRED. And this resource pulls BEA, BLS, and other economic indicators and displays it as a time series graph. So some of my favorites include GDP, CPI, PPI, import and export indexes, total public debt, employment, the S&P 500 stock market index, and so many more. So let's take a quick look at what some of these resources actually look like. So here is the BEA homepage, and users can check out their principal federal economic indicators right on the front page and explore some of their resources on the main menu. Under News, you'll also find the Survey of Current Business. And they are currently celebrating their centennial issue, which includes some fun content on the origin of the Survey of Current Business, and then also history on the development of the GDP and more. So enjoy. And then the Bureau of Labor Statistics is almost like a little overwhelming on their website. But the drop-down options under the site menu can be a good starting point. For example, for the economic releases link, to some of the economic indicators mentioned, but also I recommend checking out the subject tab for a more comprehensive list. That regional homepage box is also a good starting point for regional and state resources. And then here is a screenshot of the economic census, and you can view the about information, which covers what data is covered, their methodologies and potential uses. And then you can also access the list of their actual data by clicking the data link. And finally, here's the FRED page. Here we are looking at the total public debt, which, as you can see, has been increasing significantly over the last 40 years. So sorry to show that, but here we go. And then also we have a little bonus resource. So this is a free non-government source of government data, which is really sleek and fun to use. Many of the data resources mentioned can be kind of clunky and confusing, and this tool allows you to easily browse and search and export government and public data for analysis. So if you haven't checked out Data USA, definitely do. It's a pretty cool resource. All right, and that concludes our presentation. And we look forward to your questions. And if you would like to reach out to us in the future, our emails are included on the slide. And then you can also view the resources mentioned as well as others using the following link to our research guide. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Zoe and Annette. Perfect timing. So we have 5 minutes to take questions. I'm going to turn it over to Ash.
Hey, I am not seeing a lot of questions. We had some like consensus that some of these tools are awesome, and some additional, talking about SBDC net, and the Census Business Builder tool and things like that, and mention of a couple of sort of weekly surveys that come out. But I don't think there are any questions pending right now. Oh, we have somebody asking to put a link to the LibGuide in chat, if that's possible.
Yes, one moment, I will do that. Okay.
Oh, and there's one question, it looks like. Some of the government publications are dated. Do you think it will take a while for them to catch up with changes re-COVID?
Okay, so do you have a government resource in mind when talking about data for COVID?
I think it's just a general question relating to the fact that some of the publications might have been delayed.
Oh, yeah.
More than usual, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, and I think that is sort of a challenge with a lot of government resources, and timeliness wasn't necessarily one of the benefits that was listed in that initial slide. So with some of the economic indicators, those tend to be pretty current, but obviously like census data is a little bit behind. So, and that's where some of those proprietary sources are a little bit more useful, I think.
Okay. It looks like we have another one. What breadcrumbs do you recommend for folks to follow if we're looking for state level data sets and resources, especially COVID relief related?
Yeah, and so at the state level, it's kind of the Wild West because it really depends on the actual state and how they disseminate information. And so, usually what I do, to be honest, and this is probably I don't know how to describe it, but I will usually put the state and then I'll add a Google site operator and have it say gov. And so I pull up sort of information, relating to that, because it'll just kind of vary from state to state what breadcrumbs you might use. I know that there are some aggregated lists. So there's a Secretary of State's list that you can access online that does have all of the state websites linked. But yeah, I tend to, just like everybody else, use Google to discover government resources. And USA.gov might also be a useful tool for that.
And somebody pointed out, I actually missed one further up. Have either of you looked at international government resources at all?
A little bit. I would say that my knowledge of government sources is not as it's not as good as my U.S. knowledge, and mostly like my experience comes from working at the law firm. But I know that there are some wonderful guides out there that cover international resources.
If we have time for one or two more, have you found productive ways to sell these to patrons and students? There's often kind of a stigma against these resources, I guess, because they're not easy to use and kind of clunky.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And so I think my approach has mostly just been to sort of convey relevance and usefulness to students right off the bat. I let them know that they are going to be losing access to a lot of the nicer databases that are available through our library. And so I basically just try to let them know that this will help them once they graduate, and this is a transferable skill. But I think also providing sort of guided exercises and giving them opportunities to play with these resources is important as well.
Yes, we teach a section of an information strategies for management course with business students, and typically we'll profile resources like these to help them, again, make those evidence-based decisions when it comes to group challenges that they might work on. In one case, we also had a case competition. So pointing out these resources and really talking up the different benefits is certainly a help. And it's advantageous to have them use these types of sources.
Thanks, guys. That was the last question that we have time for. Again, stick around for a happy hour coming up right at 5 p.m. Next, I'm going to ask that Annette and Zoe please turn their cameras and mics off, and we're going to turn it over to Mark Pond in just a sec. Go ahead and screen share, Mark. And while Mark's getting set up, I'm going to introduce him. So our next presenter is Mark Pond. It's he, him, his from Spokane Public Library, presenting Don't Go It Alone, Crowdsourcing Your Library's Business Toolbox. Since 2006, Mark has been the business research librarian with the Spokane Public Library. From 1998 to 2006, Mark worked in similar capacities for the Seattle Public Library as well as the University of Washington Libraries. During Mark's tenure at the Spokane Public Library, he has led the effort to develop Spokane Public Library into a nationally recognized leader in the field of business research at public libraries. Mark believes if we truly live in the information age, we need to act on the knowledge that libraries are the ideal vehicle for providing equitable access to exclusive resources for the communities we serve. Mark, I'm turning it over to you.
All right, thanks so much. Am I coming through loud and clear?
You sound great.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks to conference organizers for putting this together. Super excited to hop on here and share some thoughts. Thanks, Annette and Zoe, for a great session there. And Zoe, go Zags. Glad to always see a former Spokane resident here on these things. All right. Limited amount of time, fair amount of ground to cover. So we'll just go ahead and dive in. But I've got my contact information here. If you don't have a chance to jot it down, there'll be 15 other ways that you can be able to capture it later on. So let's go ahead and just start in with the subject here. Whoops, went too far. Okay, all right. So in terms of kind of the genesis of the idea about where this bubbled up in terms of using the public library as kind of a crowdfunding source for business research tools. A little bit of background to kind of give you a sense of where I was coming from and then ideally where I would like to see my library go. But first off, I'm not sure here in this picture if I'm Adam or God, but I do have the receding hairline of God. I'm working on the godlike beard. So you guys take that information and kind of make your own conclusions there. But I'll take a quick poll here. No need to shout out, but just a quick thumbs up if anyone here on the call is working in a library that has unlimited resources in terms of their budget. And I will wait for about 2 seconds and I will assume that I will see none. And that's my world as well. And you guys are my people in that we live in a world of constrained resources and we have to be able to kind of make some choices professionally about kind of how to rank one tool over the other. But in terms of Spokane Public Library, I've been here in this role since 2006. Prior to that, I worked for Seattle Public Library and also University of Washington for a stint. But 2006 to about 2011, 2012 or so here in Spokane, those were the dark years. I just sat at the reference desk at our downtown branch, waiting for business questions to come my way. And it was complete radio silence. Seriously, crickets that maybe once every 6 months, a business question might come my way. So when Great Recession hit 2008, 2009, kind of had this kind of a existential crisis about, geez, I don't think that I can justify my existence here. I really need to figure out a better way to do what I'm doing. And At that time, we had a pretty small set of tools in our toolbox. Basically, we had Reference USA. I think we had Demographics Now, and then ProQuest. I think that those were the three that we had at the time. So I just took those tools, walked up and down Main Street, roamed around town, knocking on doors of businesses, business organizations, local chamber, that sort of thing, to say, hey, this is what we have. Is it of any value to you? Because no one's using it. Literally, no one is using it for business purposes. And I had a couple fairly big wins early on where I was chatting with a guy here in town. He had just developed an app for 18-wheeler safety checks. So normally that process was a two-person job where one person would be up in the cab of the truck and the other guy would be back behind the trailer saying, turn on the left blinker. And they would test it and check that off the list. So he came up with basically an app that kind of got it down to a one-person operation. So I was showing him Reference USA and he said, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Can it like pull together a list of trucking companies up and down the West Coast? And I said, yeah, give me 13 seconds and boom, there's your list. And he was just floored. He's like, I just paid $1,800 for that exact same list yesterday. Where were you? So, so that was kind of the insight there. Like, okay, we've got good tools. It's just that we've kind of, at least in the public library world, we kind of got backed into this marketing corner where if people think of public library, they think of books, and that's about as far as it goes. So with that bit of knowledge, I thought, okay, we've got some useful stuff. I'm going to go start knocking on some more doors around town and just kind of spreading the word about what we have. And the tools, like I said at the beginning, they were pretty basic, but they were really functional and they covered a lot of ground. And I realized fairly quickly on that that basic set of tools kind of gave me a good platform to kind of a launch pad. And I thought, all right, what are the other tools that I should be looking at and pulling into my public library? So I spent about a year, maybe even as close to a year and a half. I pulled together the list of US News, World Report, their list of top ranked business schools. And then I went through the top probably 15 or 20 top ranked business schools at the time. And I put together this massive spreadsheet of all of the databases that those libraries at those universities subscribe to in support of their business programs. And then kind of put together this rubric showing which ones are the most common, what ones really bubble to the top. And EBSCO Business Source Complete was one of them. IBIS World was another. So those were within my range and my budget. So I went out and got those. But then from there, it started to get a little more interesting. That the community was starting to figure out that, wow, the public library has some pretty cool tools available publicly for free. And rather than going to ibisworld.com and paying $920 or $925 per pop for each one of those reports, they could come to the library and get it for free. So that word tends to spread pretty quickly. My first kind of aha moment, though, was with Statista. And I had a trial access to Statista set up at the time, but I was doing some market research for a local company here in town. It's a medical lab and testing facility, but they had offices scattered around the nation, and they were looking to maybe get into some different lines of business. So with my trial subscription to Statista, I was just crushing their questions out of the ballpark. They would throw what they would think would be a real curveball, and Statista would answer it. You know, so it was just a thing of beauty and well timed. But I contacted this company and said, "Hey, my subscription to Statista, it's running out at the end of the week. If you have more questions, shoot them my way. I'll dive in. We'll see if we can get this wrapped up." And their response was, "Oh, don't worry. Now that we know kind of where to find the data, we'll just get our own subscription and we'll tackle it on our own. Thanks." So I got that email, and I don't know, maybe half an hour later, I just had the thought of, wait a second, back that up. This company is going to pay thousands of dollars for their own subscription to Statista, and it's going to be locked within their four walls. Nobody else can get access to it. And they have to carry the full cost of, shouldering that subscription. So I called them back up and I said, hang on a second, if you're going to spend however many thousands of dollars that you're going to spend on your subscription to Statista, how about if you take that money, give it to the library, and then you guys will still have access to it, but then also I'll have access to it. Acme company down the street gets access to it. Everybody wins. And their response was, can we do a combined press release? And I was like, yeah, we can do 50 combined press releases. I don't care. Yeah, just give me the money. So that was kind of the first piece of the puzzle that really kind of clicked in, was subscription to Statista that was funded from outside the library's budget. And then from there, it's kind of been a slow roll ever since I think that was about 2014 that we got that. And then 2016, we were able to line up a subscription to Bloomberg Terminal. Pat on Spokane Public Library's back. We're one of 2 public libraries that I'm aware of in the nation that provide access to a Bloomberg Terminal. It's us and New York Public Library. And, in terms of kind of the public library democratizing access to really high-end, expensive information that tends to only be accessible to a certain segment of our population, I think that we've got a duty to really try to figure that out, that if we live in the information age and our communities don't have access to the same information that other communities do, that's like living in the Iron Age, but only having access to bronze. That really puts us at a disadvantage. So in terms of paying for Bloomberg, our library foundation, they covered the first 2 years of that subscription. And, so that was 2016 to 2018. And then in the interim, 2018 up till now, I've been fundraising from my Bloomberg users. And this year was supposed to be the year where this all just, where I could really just push this hard, but COVID has made it hard to fundraise, as it turns out. And also it makes it hard for people to get access to our Bloomberg terminal. Right now it's down in my basement, which I've been able to work with Bloomberg to get remote access set up for folks who already have an account set up with us, but it's clunky. So it's not flowing quite as well this year, but I've been able to raise about 1/3 of the subscription cost for the upcoming year, and got some other irons in the fire, but looking forward to seeing if we can cover that full cost. Last one, this one just came together about 18 months ago. Subscription to PitchBook, as far as I know, I believe that we're the only public library in the nation that PitchBook works with. It was a push. PitchBook, they were initially pretty reluctant. Their response when I called them up and said, hey, I'd like to get a subscription to your product. And they said, we make a lot of money selling this data. So how does that work to have a publicly available access point? And my answer to that was, look, I work with a number of universities around town. We have Gonzaga, we have Washington State University, we have Eastern Washington University, we have Whitworth. None of those business programs have a subscription to PitchBook, and I work with those programs pretty closely on a routine basis. So I'm basically offering to pay you, PitchBook, $19,000 a year to be your outside sales guy here in town. And their response was, oh, well, when you put it that way, yeah, let's give it a try. So PitchBook, though, is putting zero pressure on the library's budget. It's all funded from outside, from community members. I think I have 6 or 7 different entities around town where they all want to have access to PitchBook data, but it makes 0 sense. It just doesn't pencil for them to pay the full $20,000 or $25,000 that PitchBook would charge them, and then keep it within just their organization. So for the library to be able to step in and kind of be the crowdsourcing hub, when it works really well. And it gets us access to some of these really expensive tools that would otherwise just fall outside my grasp, but they would fall outside the grasp of any one entity here in town. And even with PitchBook and Those other resources being kind of community funded. I feel like I'm leaning about as heavily on the library's collection budget as I can with all of our other business research tools, without feeling like I'm ripping picture books out of the hands of local children. So this is kind of a great way to be able to not put pressure on our library's budget, but still have access to some really amazing tools. All right, so then the question is, well, would this work in your community? And I'll have to shrug my shoulders there. I don't know. Spokane, we're kind of Goldilocks size community. This is basically what Spokane looked like this morning when I woke up. We're a mid-sized city. I think we're right at 220,000 folks within the city limits, but we're in a pretty rural area. It's not like we're just kind of part of a larger, heavily populated metropolitan area. We're kind of on an island out here in Eastern Washington in terms of being the biggest city. So, so we're kind of, we're big enough to have some muscle and some budget to work with, but at the same time, we're not so big that, like using PitchBook for an example, that that we're not threatening as the public library. So I was able to ask PitchBook to say, hey, look at your sales data for the Spokane region for the last 2-3 years. Am I really horning in on anything here if I were to offer public access to this? And they sheepishly said, no, you're really not. So, so it might be just a fluke that this works really well in Spokane, and it might not work. It might not necessarily transfer and translate to other communities, but I'd say given the upside, it's definitely worth thinking about. And then in terms of where to go, what doors to knock on to start this kind of crowdsourcing fundraising. SourceLink, I grabbed this slide from their page, and they do a fabulous job of just kind of giving me the 90,000 foot overview of all the folks that probably have an interest in having access for your local community to some of these tools. And SourceLink, they put libraries kind of up in the upper corner or upper side of the slide there. And I would move that library piece down to the middle of the page and make sure that that's connected to all those other bubbles there. That's kind of our role. Oh, and one other thing, one entity that SourceLink left out, because this is aimed more at kind of the entrepreneurial community. That's kind of what they're focused on, but definitely draw in a bubble of your own of existing businesses that have been around maybe for years, but they've been paying out the nose or just doing without these types of resources. So to be able to pull them in and say, look, your business really needs this, and it makes a lot of sense for you to throw some money into the hat and make it available for the entire community. All right, so that's kind of all the upsides. The drawbacks, there are always going to be some. I would say probably the first one is that this doesn't just happen on its own. It takes some time and persistence and just keep showing up, keep knocking on doors, keep having those conversations. So developing those partnerships around town, which, this is doing double duty because we should be doing that anyway. But then it gets it's complicated sometimes raising the funds. And then how do those funds get transferred to the library? Do those flow through the library foundation so they're tax deductible? Working out the contracts with the database vendors to make sure that they're on board with what we're trying to do. Just this fall, after 4 years of having our subscription to Bloomberg, I actually got a call from Bloomberg data compliance officer, where he's like, you guys have public access, you're offering public access to Bloomberg? And I said, yeah, I've been shouting that from the rooftops for 4 years. And he's like, yeah, that doesn't normally fly. So I had about a 48-hour kind of panic attack where Bloomberg huddled up, and then they came back and said, okay, all right, it looks like the usage that you guys are getting out of this, it still falls within their bounds of acceptable use. But again, I was able to kind of float that argument to say, look, Gonzaga doesn't have a Bloomberg terminal. Whitworth doesn't. Eastern doesn't. I'm don't you want these business graduates to have a sense of what your tool is and what it can do when they leave school? And they're like, yeah, that might make some sense. The other piece, and this kind of really follows immediately on that, is that it's not just a one and done type of project. You have to keep going back. And once the budget gets allocated for 2021, I'm already thinking about 2022 and who I'm going to try to pull in extra, because kind of the promise that I've made to some of our initial funders is that I'm going to be looking every year to expand that base of donors. So if they were in for $6,000 this year for their subscription to pay, I'm hoping to get that down to $3,000 that they can put in this year and still keep that resource rolling, but be able to spread the cost around. Then one last piece here, this is pretty important. This is one that I just kind of stumbled into without any foresight on my part. But for a couple of years, we had a subscription to Buxton. I don't know if anybody's bumped into that, but super deep dive into retail sales data. They're pulling credit card transactions and tying it to Experian household segmentation reports. And there were about 5 or 6 organizations around town that had already paid for a subscription. So I wasn't in on the initial kind of contract negotiations with Buxton. And then as it turned out, it's like a $55,000 a year tool. In the library, we were paying, I think, $4,000 to join in on this partnership. And the original cohort that signed the contract, they realized about 2 years into it that they weren't getting the data that they thought that they had been promised from Buxton. And it was just a miscommunication between those organizations. Library didn't have anything to do with it, but it was working beautifully for me. So I wanted to keep it rolling, but the other funders pulled the plug and said, no, this just isn't working. So having that conversation straight up and upfront to say, here are kind of the metrics of what I think is going to be, if this particular database is successful, here's kind of the usage that I'm looking to get out of it, and just make sure that your metrics for success match up with the other funders, so that there's no miscommunication there. And then we've kind of talked about all of this in passing as we've been going through this, but definitely one of the biggest benefits is that, my library doesn't have to take on the full cost of providing these really top shelf resources to our community. Neither does anyone else around town. And then the other benefit is that often with our resources that the libraries go out and we buy, we go out, we procure them, we put them on our website, and then we kind of have to wait for people to come find them, or we have to market them. Whereas if people already have money on the line to get access to something, they're ready to go and ready to be users of that tool the minute that it's ready, and they're happy to kind of crow to the rest of the community that they were part of making it available. So that takes a big chunk of the kind of marketing weight off of my shoulders, in that I can kind of lean on all my co-funders to help get the word out. And, again, it just really spreads the burden around so that no one entity has to cover it all. One bullet point that I should have put on here that I didn't, that I think is really crucial, is that, it really taking this approach, it really positions the library as an essential business service here in my community. And, for better or worse, the business community tends to have outsized influence on local political decisions. So I'm a big fan of being a business librarian. I love it, but really kind of the thing that captures my love and adoration and just amazement is the library as an institution. Having an organization here in town that's just built around sharing stuff equitably with our community, that's amazing. That boggles my mind that such a thing even exists. So really, when I'm out in the community, Yes, I'm looking for users of our business resources and our business tools, but really at the base of it, I'm looking for voters. I'm looking for folks that will say yes to our levies, say yes to our bond measures, and really support the library as a whole institution. So, so that I think is another just crucial piece of getting our business communities behind what our libraries are doing. All right.
Hey,
With
Mark,
that,
just want to let you know 1 minute left. Perfect
okay,
timing.
I am done. Perfect. Yeah. So questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, be happy to take them.
Ash, feel free to scroll up and take some of those questions.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to touch on even a fraction of these. So there were a whole bunch of comments, just in awe of you know, being able to make this stuff happen and get some of these subscriptions. So I'm going to try and condense a bunch of these questions. There's sort of a number of questions around, did library leadership have reservations about sort of taking on a joint funding model? And do the companies get any kind of like tax break, you know, to write off any of the cost of these donations?
Yeah, so the first part, library administration, I've got a fabulous admin team here in Spokane, and Spokane Public, we're a pretty small organization really, that I'm in a non-supervisory position, and there's one person between me and the library, head of the library system. So they have been very hands-off and they've given me probably way more rope to hang myself than they logically should, but they've been very supportive to just say, hey, it seems like what you're doing is working well, keep doing it. And yeah, so I've had very few restrictions on me that way. Also, you know, I'm the entire business team for my library. That probably comes with some downsides in terms of lack of some brain power that it would be good to have with some other folks to kick some ideas around. But also then it comes with kind of this dictatorial power where if I wake up in the morning and I think I should spend some time talking to this particular person, I can go do that. And I don't have committees, sorry, to run those decisions through. So, so yeah, we're a pretty flexible and nimble organization, and my admin team is very adamant to say, hey, if you screw up, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt and know that we should just learn from whatever the mistake was and we'll move on. In terms of tax stuff, definitely consult with your tax advisor, but running through the donations through the Library Foundation does make it a tax deductible expense in many cases. So that has worked out really well. There have been some changes in the tax law recently that make it harder to itemize those individual, private donations from individual households. So that has kind of less of an appeal right now than it used to, but
I think one of the other, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. My video maybe paused there for a second. I think one of the other sort of main themes of a bunch of the questions, there's a lot of particular ones, relates to licensing negotiation and especially commercial use, in a public library setting. Because in a lot of these, from an academic library viewpoint, that is something that is very, very hard to negotiate in licenses. So I think there's a lot of questions about how do you negotiate, that potential commercial use of the databases. I have lost volume. Am I the only person?
I can hear you, Ash. Mark, we can't hear you now. Try again. Looks like Mark is trying to reconnect his sound.
can you hear me now?
I can now.
Okay, all right. Whew. Shoot, what was, oh, right, licensing. Right, yeah, so I think that might be kind of just a quirky thing about Spokane. So using IBIS World as an example, I know that, well, at least when we subscribed, it was us and New York Public were the two public institutions that had subscription to IBIS World. There might be others now, but I know from old library school colleagues who are in St. Louis, somebody else is in Portland, that they tried to line up a subscription to IBIS World at their public library, and IBIS World said, no, sorry, it's too big of a market for us to license our stuff at the public library. So a lot of the concern, I think, on the part of those database vendors, they do lock access down in terms of Statista, IBIS World, Bloomberg, PitchBook. Those are all in library use only products. You have to come in, be there physically in person, which is great for me because then I get this kind of steady flow of folks to interact with and kind of push the rest of the library's agenda on them. But so I think that kind of gives those database vendors some sense of security that we're not just completely blowing the doors wide open and whoever has a library card that however they happen to get it, and they're from Indiana, that they're going to be able to tap into our resources.
All right, that brings us right to 5 o'clock. I think that means it's time for happy hour.
Woohoo!
Thank you so much to our speakers today. Thank you to Zoe, to Andrea, to Mark. It was really great. I loved hearing from you guys. And that concludes our resources and spaces presentation today.
Thank you, Jillian. My name's Sarah Thin, and I'm one of the co-chairs, and happy to have you all here for the networking session. And I hope you will stick around for the next hour, because we hope to have lots of discussions and questions that you may have had during the sessions today that we couldn't quite get to. It looked like we had a lot of questions in the last session. So Mark and Zoe, if you guys can stick around and maybe follow up on some of those questions earlier.